from 97.3 ESPN.com. It's a Eagles-Bears matchup, Monday Night Football, plus all the NFL news and notes. John, of course, covers the league for today's Pigskin.com nationally. John, let's look at a couple of things from yesterday. Obviously, going around and round of the Sunday games here. Start off with Dallas and Washington and get your knee-jerk reaction on that one, because I think the knee-jerk reaction for a lot of people is that Washington is done, that they're out.
Well, it tends to be Washington's way. It's either first or last. So right now at 0-2, they're looking like last. But, early in the offseason, I thought the way they handled the Cousins contract negotiations, I thought that could end up being a self-fulfilling prophecy in the fact that they didn't show confidence in him. And I know he's overpaid anyway with the franchise tag, but once you let it creep into the guy you expect to lead your team, creep into his mind that you're not sold on him, and they did that by not signing him to a long-term deal. I think at that point, confidence is such a big part of this game. The guy who showed up this year is not the guy who was playing at the end of last year. It's as simple as that. The accuracy is all over the place, and he just doesn't seem to believe in himself. And unless that gets fixed, the Redskins are not going to have much of a chance this season.
Well, what'd you take from Dallas' side of things there? They go on the road to win.
I think it's a big win for Dallas, just for the fact is they finally won a game without Tony Romo, and it's been like pulling teeth. So the fact they got over that hump, and Dak Prescott has been playing well. He's been doing things. He hasn't been turning the football over. That's the most important thing. Obviously, it hasn't been as easy as the preseason was for him, and that's expected. Ezekiel Elliott is not near the impact player some thought he would be from the starting blocks. But, hey, as I said, getting that win for the same reason I talked about with Cousins. To get over that mental hurdle is a big, big thing for the Dallas Cowboys.
John, how about your reaction to the Giants win and their ability to get to 2-0?
Well, the Giants have improved a lot defensively, and they spent a lot of money. They brought in a lot of talent, and they've been representative on that side of the ball, as other than being among the worst defenses in football, which is what they were last season. So what we kind of talked about on the show last week when we all got together, hey, right now the Giants are the best of a bad lot in the NFC East. And a lot of that is the fact that they've improved enough defensively. I don't think they're going to be a top 10 defense by any stretch. But as long as they can stay mid-level, 15 to 20, somewhere in that range, and not be embarrassingly bad on that side of the football, their passing game is explosive enough to where I think the Giants have to now be the favorite in the NFC East.
I have to get your opinion and your take on Sam Bradford's game last night. Should we expect that Bradford has turned the corner and now he's the guy that we saw at the end of last year? Because certainly Chris Collinsworth had a high opinion on him. What was your opinion?
I'm with Chris. That's the first time you constantly hear, and we heard it time and time again, people, so many ex-coaches, scouts, players that have played with him, talk about Sam Bradford's accuracy. It was there last night. He had some balls that were phenomenal, just throwing the football downfield. Part of it is that's the best receiver he's ever played with. That kid, Stephon Diggs, is special. He's going to be a superstar in this league. And that's what we talked about, not having the supporting cast in St. Louis or even in Philadelphia to a certain degree. Now, the bad part is Vikings' offensive line stinks, and they're going to get him killed. He showed his toughness last night against the Packers, kept picking himself up. If that continues, there's no way Sam Bradford, and that's not a shot at him because some people will say he's injury prone. He showed his toughness, but there is no quarterback that can take the beating that he took last night week after week.
And, of course, Chris Collinsworth will now give his Hall of Fame induction speech. He's getting that ready for camp.
Well, Chris now owns Pro Football Focus, so he's got a pimp, or he's got an ownership stake, so he's got to pimp the ratings. And
I was wondering,
why
did you notice that last night, that the players in the introductions? I was wondering about that.
Yeah, that's right. That's why
they were giving each player's Pro Football Focus ranking last night. Wow.
Yeah, so Chris got a deal there, but hey, and they do a good job. I'm not trying to stress. Sam played well. He really, really did. I mean, as I said, Diggs, I think he had 9 catches for 182 yards. The touchdown was a perfect throw. The other touchdown, it was almost similar to Carson Wentz. It was eerie because both of his touchdown throws were perfectly placed. The one over the shoulder to the tight end, Kyle Rudolph, and then on the post down the field to Stephon Diggs, just perfectly thrown balls. Very, very similar to what Carson was able to accomplish against the Cleveland Browns. Now, the Green Bay Packers are a much more difficult opponent than Cleveland, obviously, and I think that's what excites people. But, hey, you got to look at it realistically. And as I said, that Vikings offensive line, he took a beating.
Yes, he
and
did.
it's not sustainable.
Well, much like Wentz did against Cleveland, took a lot of hits, and we'll see. We'll have plenty more on Week 2 tomorrow when John joins us in studio for all 4 hours. We'll break down all the games and go back over the week that was in the NFL. Let's turn our attention to tonight's action, John, where obviously the Eagles looking to go 2-0 to stay toe-to-toe with the Giants, and it would be a really nice win for them because obviously with Washington losing and Dallas being 1-1, you can keep yourself separated from those two. But let's get Saturday. Doug Peterson announced that Ertz, as we expected, and McKelvin both out for the game. How does that affect the game plan for tonight?
Well, I think it affects defensively. You go in with 3 corners, and the one strength, at least on paper, the Chicago Bears offensively is the wide receiver position and Jay Cutler's ability to get the ball downfield. So that's a concern. They're going to start Ron Brooks on the outside. Jalen Mills will come in the nickel, and Brooks will move into the slot. And I just don't like those matchups against the Bears' big receivers. Alshon Jeffrey specifically, he's one of the best in football at catching those 50-50 balls. So I think there's going to be a times in this game where Jay Cutler just throws it up for Jeffrey and says, go get it. And I'm not sure if the Eagles have the corners to stop that, and we'll see how it plays out. That's why I think the pass rush for Philadelphia is the most important aspect of this game tonight, because they got to get to Jay Cutler and they got to do it early.
Yeah, and you talked about this last week, John, where their tackle's not very good, but their strength is in the interior of their line, which matches the Eagles' strength, the interior of the defensive line with Benny Logan and Fletcher Cox. But can the Eagles get enough pressure on Cutler with those ends?
Yeah, I think they can, because where the difference is, as you mentioned, Chicago is very strong on the interior with their 2 guards, and then it kind of falls off the table with their 2 tackles. Whereas the Eagles are very strong at defensive tackle, not as strong at defensive end, but it doesn't drop off the table. They're still really good players in Brandon Graham, Connor Barwin, Vinny Curry. So they should be able to handle Bobby Massey and Charles Leno, who are 2 of the worst tackles in starting tackles in the NFL. And I think that's what Jim Schwartz is counting on. Where I'm concerned is if they don't get to him early, Jay Cutler, all of a sudden he starts getting confidence, he feels comfortable in the pocket, he can get really, really hot really quickly. So I think that the beginning of this game, the first couple drives, is going to be very key, because I think it's really, really important for the Eagles to get pressure and get it early.
Yeah, and you mentioned the fact that they're going to roll with just 3 corners. You know, Mills going to play on the outside. Brooks will slide in, but we can also probably see some of Malcolm Jenkins, I guess, slide into that role if the Eagles have some problems too, because Peterson mentioned Terrence Brooks, who they got late off the waiver wire there, that could come in and play some safety. So the Eagles do have a little bit they can mix and match, but very odd to go with just 3 corners in this game.
Yeah, it is. And as you mentioned, Jim said all his safeties, almost all of them, have corner in their background somewhere. Even Jalen Watkins obviously was a corner in college. Rodney McLeod even played some corner in college. And Malcolm Jenkins came into this league as a corner from Ohio State and played a lot of slot corner. But I think when you move and when you shift guys to safety, you do it for a reason. And that's because they can handle the physicality and run support. And they're probably good coverage players for safety, but that doesn't necessarily translate into good coverage players as cornerbacks. And I look at Jenkins as a perfect example because he's a guy who, if you're dealing with big slot receivers like Jordan Matthews, for instance, that the Eagles have, he's really, really effective. But when you start getting those small, quick guys that New England is famous for in the slot, Julian Edelman, obviously, Wes Welker in days gone by, he's not as effective with those guys because he doesn't have the short area quickness. And unfortunately, that's what Chicago has with Eddie Royal. Now, he's not at the level of an Edelman, but that's the type of player he is. So that could be a problem if the Eagles expect to go that way. But while I say that, they hope they won't have to do that because they hope Brooks and Mills will hold up well and they won't have to pull the plug on that plan.
Yeah, and, last week Jordan Hicks graded out really well, and I think if you watch the game, you might, or look at the stats afterwards too, you might say, all right, what was it about him? How do the Eagles linebackers factor in against this Bears team? Langford was criticized, Jeremy Langford, their running back, by John Fox, talked a lot about how it was pretty critical of his performance in week number 1. So they think there was more there from the running back spot, which, the Eagles linebackers, which was, a spot that I don't know that stood out against the Browns. So you wonder how the linebackers will fare tonight against this Bears team.
Yeah, I mean, I don't worry about that matchup as much because, as you mentioned, Langford is their main back now. It's not Matt Forte. If Matt Forte was still there, I'd be really, really concerned because he's such a great receiver out of the backfield. He's such a well-rounded running back. And they've taken a big step back. But that's where the Bears are, and they're kind of caught between trying to rebuild and having a veteran corner. They kind of got rid of Matt Forte, who would have really, really helped them, but they kept Jay Cutler. So in a lot of ways, their plan doesn't make a lot of sense because they have a quarterback who's at least in theory ready to win now, and the rest of their team really isn't ready to win now, and that includes the running back position. And as you mentioned, Langford did not play well in the opener. They hope he has a bounce back, but it's certainly not a Matt Forte type situation where you really have to be concerned with him.
Hey, John, Carson Wentz said something last week. He admitted, and Jason Kelsey kind of concurred, that they had some communication breakdowns on the line with the protections here. And, Wentz took a lot of hits. That was a storyline afterwards. So how big of a factor are Barbary, Kelsey, and Brandon Brooks in this game tonight?
Well, anytime you play on the road in this league, it's difficult because of the noise, and you have to go with, signals, and it takes you sort of a half second when you're on the offensive line. Whereas when you're at home, you don't have to worry about that type of situation, and that's the concern. And Carson admitted this week the toughest road environment he ever faced was Missoula, Montana, which I looked up, and the population of Missoula is 69,000, and there's going to be about 65,000 in Soldier Field. So he's never gone through this before. And, hey, he's a rookie quarterback on the road for the first time. And communication, we're all going to be watching. How smoothly does it go? I expect there to be at least a couple hiccups, certainly.
All right, John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com. His 5 on the Bears is up at the website if you want to learn more about Chicago and what John's looking at from that Bears team. John, give us your key to the game tonight and your pick.
Well, my key to the game, as I mentioned before, is the Eagles' pass rush, because I think Jay Cutler has proven throughout his career if you get to him early, he tends to sort of fall apart a little bit mechanically, and then the turnovers can start. And I think the Eagles will have enough to do that, but it's going to be difficult, as I said, in their first road game under Carson Wentz. But I have the Eagles finding a way at 21-17.
21-17 from John. Eagles pass rush helping them to a win tonight on the road. We'll see how that plays out. John will be in studio tomorrow with a full recap of Eagles and Bears, plus all the NFL Week 2 action tomorrow on the Sports Bash. All right, John. Appreciate it, pal.
Hey, thank you, guys. See you tomorrow.